But funny enough, I was actually fired from that role, which is something I speak about on my YouTube channel, how I was fired from my first ever tech job. And that was kind of like a big moment for me because it was like a chip on my shoulder. Now I have to go back and learn and do exactly what I want, which is always cloud computing.
Hello and welcome to the Cloud Career Mentor Show. My name is Fayomi. Our goal with this show is always to educate, inspire, and motivate. And today we're doing something a little bit different. Like usually we have someone who's gone down the AWS path and we talk about their journey. But today we have someone who's actually gone down the Azure path. And I think this would be quite interesting for our listeners. He's not only a talented cloud engineer, but he's also a YouTuber as well who helps beginner cloud engineers to understand the journey. Welcome to the show, Caleb Oni. How are you doing, man?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, excited to be speaking with you. This is like the first kind of like, I don't know, collab podcast interview that I've
collaboration.
So I'm excited, nervous at the same time, but yeah, really excited. Thanks for having me.
No, it's going to be good fun. I think what would be good to know is what's your current job title? And, if you could give us an overview of your cloud journey so far, just at a high level, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah. So my current job title is Cloud Security Engineer, and at the moment focusing on 365 security. So I have kind of a focus on Azure, and since the beginning of my career in cloud, which is not so long, it's probably, I'd say 2 years long. Mm-hmm. I've been focused on Azure from the jump, and that's the cloud provider which I've chosen.
Okay.
And kind of followed on. And
no, I think that makes sense. Before you actually got into the cloud, before you heard of the cloud, what did you do?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So before getting into cloud, I was at university. When I finished university, it was now to figure out what exactly I want to do, and I had options. I had like a list of what do I want to do. I had like data. Do I want to go into cloud computing? Do I want to go into like help desk support stuff? Or like there's other options as well. And I was like going through, ticking off, okay, do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? What's the pros and cons of cloud? What's the pros and cons of all these other areas? And when I finished university, it was more of a thing of what do I go for? And I was looking for any role at all at the time. I wasn't focused on cloud. The role which I got after many rejections and failed applications was specializing in IT operations at a company that kind of focused on delivering a certain service. I won't go into the details of that. But funny enough, I was actually fired from that role, which is something I speak about on my YouTube channel, how I was fired from my first ever tech job. And that was kind of like a big moment for me because it was like a chip on my shoulder. Now I have to go back and learn and do exactly what I want, which is always cloud computing.
Actually, I'd like to stay on that actually, because I think that's a really important topic, because everyone always talks about their success. Everyone talks about when everything's going well, but I'd love to hear that story of how you got fired, because I think that's quite fascinating. Because I have a story where I got let go as well, and I've told on this channel before. So yeah, I'd love to hear your story. Are you interested in getting your first cloud job? If you answered yes, then I have a free guide just for you. This free guide walks you through a proven step-by-step process to help you get that first cloud job. It walks you through the 3 simple steps you can take today to make yourself highly employable. The link is in the description below, so make sure you download it now if you're interested. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, in a nutshell, my story of how I got fired, I kind of went into a role as this, like I said, IT operations engineer. It was my first role. Didn't have any experience, didn't have much training, didn't know what I was doing at all. And so when I went in, I was so clueless. I didn't even know how to RDP onto another device. I didn't even know network, like IP config, basic stuff that an engineer should know. I didn't know. And this kind of proves the point that what you learn at university, the system is very outdated and doesn't actually teach you how to be an engineer. But yeah, I went in not knowing much, and the company kind of wanted someone who at least knew or had a very good foundation in being an engineer, which maybe I was just such a great communicator that they thought that was me. But yeah, I didn't have those foundations and I made a lot of mistakes. And yeah, I didn't, there was like a 6-month probation. And for me, it went to about 3 months before I was let go from the role. And it was just, the reasons were not a great fit, poor
just wasn't the right fit, yeah.
Different stuff. And yeah, that was
I think just to add to that, because I think you've raised really two really good points I want to sort of highlight for my listeners. Yeah. One point you mentioned was, you went in and you weren't ready. And I think, because a lot of my listeners are people who want to get their first job in the cloud industry. And I think everyone's in such a hurry to get their first job that they don't really want to take their time to learn the fundamentals and learn what will make them valuable in the workplace. And what I try to tell people is that, look, getting a job isn't a magic bullet, right? Like you still have to do the work. Like getting a job is the start of the journey. As I always encourage people to make sure they've, really worked on their skills, their technical skills to make them employable. Yeah. And the second thing you mentioned, which I thought was more valuable, is about your communication skills, how you were able to communicate effectively, which helped you get the first job. And this is another thing I talk about a lot because, again, everyone focuses on, the technical side, but, they think by being super technical, they'll be able to get a job. But I like to highlight there's also another piece, which is the communication, where you need to be able to express yourself, talk about your projects, and to be successful, you need to have both of those things, which it sounds like you do now. So I just wanted to highlight that for my listeners.
Yeah, definitely really important. Communication could take you a long way. Technical skills obviously can take you a long way. Having both of them is just really important to be like fully well-rounded.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing, Caleb. So, after this first horrible experience, because it is a horrible experience, like getting let go, it's not fun. It's, I feel like it can knock one's confidence. I know it did for me.
Yeah.
So what did you do next? So you knew you wanted to get into the cloud. What did you do next? What did you study? Did you do any certifications? Walk us through that journey.
Yeah. So I think at the time I had already known that I wanted to get into cloud through my research and deciding what I wanted to do. I'd already decided I want to get into cloud. I just took the first job that I could get. And so once I got let go, I knew that it's cloud now. I'm not trying out anything else. I'm going for what I'm passionate about, what I really want to do. And so because of that, I kind of took some time because I was kind of studying at the same time as doing that role, which made it a lot harder. I was doing a postgraduate degree, a master's degree, which I eventually dropped out of.
Out of curiosity, what were you studying in that master's?
I was studying computing. Yeah, computing and information systems, like the full MSc. But yeah, I eventually dropped out of that. Yeah, so I went back into studying, just focusing on that for a bit. And then when the new year came, I was like, boom, I need to get back on this. I continued learning about Azure, doing labs on mostly infrastructure stuff, like setting up virtual machines, playing around with the Azure portal. Yeah, basic easy stuff like that. And one of my connections who had known that I was looking for a role and he knew that Azure was where I wanted to go into, he saw a role that kind of matched what I should do, kind of a junior Azure administrator role. And that was kind of perfect for what I was looking for. Something that's junior, something that they expect you to be, at a foundational level. Also, the areas that I was learning about and researching and doing labs on and all this stuff, it kind of matched perfectly. So yeah, applied, interviewed, got the role, and that junior role I learned so much from, and yeah, kind of set me up for moving forward. I'm still very early in my career, still 2 years, but I think that helped me a lot.
To stay on one point, it's funny you mentioned that you were doing a master's because before I got into the cloud, I also considered doing a master's. And, I did the application, got approved. And then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend the next year or two learning this, going to be a student. I'm going to need to work. And it just seemed a big hassle. And then I thought, oh, what if I just learned the skills, like just started using YouTube and other resources. And fortunately, I was able to make that transition. But it sounds like you actually went down the road of studying the masters and decided that, oh, actually, this isn't for me.
Yes, exactly. And I look back and I'm like, if you spend a year learning what you already know you want to learn, you would have so much more and have learned so much more than doing a 1 year master's degree where information is not specifically what you want and might not even really be helpful for what you're going to do after you finish the master's. There's very few things within the master's or even my undergraduate degree that I actually work on and practice as a professional. So yeah, it's definitely a great idea. I'm glad you chose that route of learning online and doing it at university.
I think as well, universities are sometimes they're really behind in their curriculum to what's happening in the real world. Yeah. But that's a conversation for another time. One thing I like to do on this channel is to set expectations for people, because there's a lot of messaging out there that, you can get your first cloud job in 3 months, you just need 2 certifications. But it sounds like you've done a lot of work, you faced a lot of rejection, which again, like everyone does, but again, no one talks about it. Could you give us a bit of a timeline to maybe when you started, when you were like, okay, I'm going to focus on cloud, to, when you got your first job, maybe how many rejections you had? For some context for me, I'd say from when I decided I wanted to get into the cloud to when I got my first job, I'd say like when I started like thinking about this and actively working towards it, it was maybe 6 months. But then I'd say probably like a year before I made the active decision, I'd been working on little things like, learning programming here and there, like, informally doing it. And so it took a long time. And for a lot of people, it takes a while. For some people, it takes 3 months because they have the right resources, the right structure and all of that. And, I faced a lot of rejections. In fact, I didn't even count the amount of rejections because I just thought, okay, I'll just keep applying. Eventually, I'll get one. So what was your experience like?
Yeah. So from the moment I decided I wanted to go after working cloud, I'd say it's difficult to put an exact date on it because I went through other jobs from that moment as well. But I'd say when I decided, I want to say something like 6 to 9 months, but that was after many rejections. Of course, as you go through the job search, rejections are such a normal thing. Like it's nothing crazy, it's nothing interesting. I'll get rejected. There are few people who don't get those rejections going on that path. I think for me, it all started with an interview that I did for a junior cloud role, which they didn't take me on. And I was like, I didn't know much about cloud. And that was the reason that they kind of rejected me. And I was like, wow, I need to get into this a bit more. I need to learn a bit more about this. And it was an Azure role. And from there, I went on to studying for the Azure Fundamentals certification. And that was like the start of the journey where I was like, okay, this fundamental certification that I've got is putting me on the path of really becoming a cloud engineer. And from there, my interest sort of sparked. I also had a mentor who was a lead cloud engineer. And that was like really helpful because I looked at his LinkedIn like almost every day. Wow, this is what he did. Okay, but then went on to learn about this stuff. And so that was a really, really helpful thing, just looking at someone else who had done it.
And just to add, like, it's so funny you said it took you 6 to 9 months, because I found that's generally the pattern. And this is sort of how I break it down. Your first 3 months are, maybe you're learning the fundamentals, you're doing some high quality cloud projects, you're getting your hands dirty, you're getting confident. 3 months later, you're now like applying for jobs, getting your CV out there, getting your resume out there while you're still working on your skills. And then 3 months after that is when you actually begin to start getting calls from recruiters, maybe start getting interviews. And so I think, 6 to 9 months. And that's, like you said, if you have like something you're following, like some structure or program, and you're actively doing it every day kind of thing. So no, thanks for sharing that. I think that's very useful for my listeners to hear. And so you've been in the cloud industry, couple of years now. I believe you said 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. How has your role changed or your responsibilities changed, from your first cloud role where you're like a junior Azure administrator to what you do now?
I think the biggest difference is sort of taking the lead on things a lot more. And I guess that's with any job really. Like if you've been there a while or you've had a bit more experience, you go from really shadowing or being really silent on the call, just, being there to learn, to kind of taking the lead because you actually know certain things. And I think for me, as I've gone on, it's more of just like a confidence thing where, okay, I know this. I'm no longer, just here because I'm learning. I'm still learning every day. But there's certain things that I know that I can contribute to the conversation on meetings, or whether it's speaking with stakeholders or sort of taking the lead on projects and sort of delegating in a sense, because technically you might be the most well-versed person in the thing or project that you're working on at the time. So yeah, just communication, taking the lead, that confidence that comes with being a lot longer.
And again, I just want to double click on that communication thing, because communication and confidence go hand in hand. And again, like a lot of people don't focus on that piece. There's so many times where, people in my program would have a mock interview and I'd ask them something simple like, okay, tell me about some projects you've worked on, and they wouldn't be able to express themselves adequately. And I think being able to communicate is so, so important. So if you're listening to this, alongside all your labs and all your projects and everything you're doing, definitely practice talking about your projects, talking about what you're doing, because communication is super important, both to get a job and also to progress within that. Again, thanks for highlighting that, Caleb. So, you're 2 years in, but, you've made a lot of progress, I think. What actions or attributes do you think have helped you the most in your cloud career?
It's a good question. I think for me, are we talking about from starting on getting into it, or whilst I've been working?
Answer it how you will. Both.
Okay. What has helped me? I think, continuously learning. That is a big thing. I think in the industry we're in, you have to continue learning. You can't just stay static. Things are always changing. Things are always being updated. I've been working in Azure for like 2 years. From the moment I started to the moment to now, there's been so many updates. There's been so many new things. Active Directory's name has changed, or like loads of different stuff that changes. So learning and continuing to learn is something that's helped me, and having the attitude, it's more the attitude towards learning that helps me a lot. I do that through certifications a lot of the time. I go through the courses online, and I think that's the number one thing for me anyways, the biggest thing that sort of helped me. Also, like I said before, improving in, or just getting more confident generally to speak to people, to build connections. And I'll say those two things.
I think those are two very good points. The continuous learning, super important. And again, communication, very important. Now, I think you've been very generous with your time, and you've been able to share some really good insights with the listeners. The final question actually is, what's one positive thing and one negative thing about working in the cloud industry, in your opinion?
Yeah, one positive and one negative. Like, positive is easy. Like, and there's loads of things I could say about positive, but I'll just be honest and say it pays very well.
Great.
Yeah,
great. I like that.
I could say that for a lot of tech jobs or tech roles, cloud computing roles, cloud professional roles, whatever it is. Maybe not at the first role you get, but as you go, it will pay well. Especially when you're experienced in that area, it pays well. There's such a great demand for cloud professionals that you will earn well because of the demand, because of the amount.
By the way, do you know what I like about you, Caleb? Because I ask this question to a lot of people, and they're like, I like the innovation. I like the fact that you could give, like, you're like, show me the money. I completely agree. And this is why there's such, like, everyone's trying to get into it, because it pays really well. And I really like the caveat you put in where it's like, it might not pay well at the start, And I think that's so important because everyone, again, because of the messaging out there, they think they're just going to walk into like a 6-figure role, straight away. And it's like, hey, you might have to start at, in the UK, 30 to 40,000, which isn't bad for your first role. In the US, 60 to 80, which isn't bad for your first role. But within 2 to 3 years, that could easily get to like the more 6-figure range, and I've seen it all the time. But it's almost like an inverted pyramid, right? Where, at the higher you go, the more your earning potential is, and it's quite significant. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, I'll just keep it honest.
It's the way to go.
What I would say is like the one negative or con is, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that you need to keep learning new things. You can't just stay static. You can't stop learning, and that's kind of like a continuous thing that you have to do throughout your career, really.
It's funny with that because it's a bit of a double-edged sword, the learning. And what I found both in myself and with other senior people is there's almost like a journey where when you start, you get your first job, you're excited, you're learning, you're soaking it all in, and then you become more mid-level and it becomes a bit overwhelming where, you're working, especially if you work in a consultancy where you're working on multiple clients or multiple projects where it just feels a bit much. But then when you become more senior, it then gets interesting again, mostly because, you're leading teams and your skills are a bit different. So you don't need to know how to do everything. You need to know they exist, but you don't actually need to know how to implement it. So it's kind of like a journey of learning in a way where, you start to learn different things as you progress in your career so you don't get burnt out. But no, that's great. I think, we're about to wrap up, but Caleb, you've been an amazing guest. I'm sure a lot of my listeners who want to know where they can learn more, is there anything you want to tell them? Where can they go to find out more?
Yes, my YouTube channel, Caleb Only Certified on YouTube. There's no other channels with that name, so
link will be in the description. So check that out, guys.
Great. Give me a subscribe, and let me find the rest.
Awesome. Thanks, Caleb, for coming on. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.